Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the SME Connect. SME Connect is coming out to you from the Stanbic Business Incubator into your TV screens now, your phones and your computers. What we are trying to do is to share a lot of practical knowledge for businesses, especially the SMEs, on how to do business better and how to look out for areas where they can grow and become better as entities. My host today is a very interesting gentleman. Francis Egbuson is a man who I have always known for when it comes to leadership and supporting businesses in how to do business the right way. His focus is very much on leadership. And again, this is a topic that is going to be quite interesting for all of you who are businessmen. I've always believed that business leaders or any entrepreneur is a business leader because he has to lead his entity and he has to make sure that he tries his best to run an entity that succeeds and also grows. This show, like I mentioned before, is brought to you by the Stanbic Business Incubator in partnership with Cloudco and coming to you as well on Urban TV right now. Now, what I also wanted to add before we just go into Francis coming online is you can find us on our social media platforms. That is SME Connect on Facebook, SME Connect on YouTube, and of course, Tony Otoa on Twitter. So let us get into this. Hi, Francis, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tony. Thank you. Thank you. Great pleasure to be here.
How is it? I can see you've grown your beard. Is it a COVID beard, or can I say it is a beard that is worth knowledge?
No, we have been very compliant. So this is evidence that we've been very compliant. But my 10-year-old daughter told me I look good this way. So I just...
I hope when you change your face, it's not like a shocker, you know. But Francis, welcome to the SME Connect. It's quite a pleasure to have you here. You're a man who has gone through a lot in terms of the businesses you've trained. I've engaged with you several times for years now. And of course, you have also started one very interesting training area, which is the 4 disciplines of execution, which many businesses have taken on. And of course, you are doing the coaching. Tell us more about your business and line of business, and then we can delve into the leadership and business issues.
Right. Thank you. So we are SEM, right? So this is our 9th, going on 10th year that we've been in Kampala. So it was founded here by Ugandans.
Yeah.
And it's just been an interesting journey. Our focus really, though, is really how do we help individuals and teams to make lasting changes in their behavior, right? So because we will suggest, and that's something we've learned through the years, that unless an individual changes, you always get a result. So you know the now famous definition of insanity, but it is true. Even if you don't call it insanity, we know that unless we change, it is difficult to achieve any type of great success. We also know that the success of any intervention, right, depends on the inner condition, right, of the intervener. It's not how smart you are. It's not the market. And by the way, there's an interesting, what we call an entrepreneurship success pie out of the Sloan School of Business. It says it's, if you look at what it takes for an individual or an enterprise to succeed, it says the idea, they talk about the market, they talk about your ability to execute, and they talk about team. Now, what's interesting is that a disproportionate percentage of that has to do with the team. Right. And we are suggesting that when it comes to team, a lot has to do with the mindset, the skills and tools that the individual has. So that's the area our business is really focused on.
Francis, I see a lot of interest in your area because you're talking about 2 things here which have come out predominantly. Teams, but more so, the aspect of change. And we've seen a lot of change happening for many businesses in the past months. How has it been on your side? And what advice have you been giving to businesses in this time where drastic changes have had to be made? But even if they haven't been made for many businesses, they're still going to be made. And I mean, you're seeing changes in the way businesses are operating. From many people to few individuals within the team. You're seeing changes in operations, going away from the usual physical interfaces to going digital. How has it been for you, and what have you been advising the businesses over this period of time?
Right. If the question is really how do teams and organizations really respond in times of uncertainty, crisis, how do we move from face to face to digital? For us as a business, that's something we started prior to COVID, right? So nobody anticipated COVID. But what we did know, though, from the past is periods of uncertainty, periods of crisis and volatility are not new, right? That they've been with us. We agree that periods like COVID has exacerbated it, but those periods have always been with us, right? So whether it is a volatility of currency, whether it is the oil market prices, whether it is government regulation, political crisis, or evil, we've always had those conditions. So for us, one of the things we've done even prior to COVID was just staying close enough to the customer to make sure that we built a certain level of loyalty, right, with our customers in the way we interacted. So true, our route to market was face to face, but it didn't take us time to transition to online. In fact, a colleague of mine, Boba, was reminding us yesterday when we had lunch with one of our clients, who's also MD of a large company in town, that one of the things that helped was a lot of the things we were advising were things we were also applying to ourselves. So for the first 2 weeks, our cadence for accountability did not change. It moved from the boardroom to Zoom, right? It moved from the boardroom to MS Teams. So that cadence continued. Our focus on priorities, those priorities were still there. How do we enable companies to remain? How do we ensure that they not just survive, but thrive in periods and actually take advantage of periods of uncertainty, right? So we focused on that as well. So I think the summary is the way businesses handle and serve in periods unlike this will also serve them even more in periods like this.
I think it's an opportunity for them to really stand out, and how they can also utilize a crisis is quite interesting. I always have this thing going on where we say, never waste a crisis, you know. Think about how you can reinvent yourself and make the best out of it. And I think that's quite true. But Francis, right now, many businesses have been coming to you, I believe, and one of the key issues, or one of the areas actually that you've been engaging with us here at the Business Incubator, has been the 4 disciplines of execution. What is it that businesses have to think of in terms of their mindset moving into this time, especially when it comes to execution? Because execution has changed, like you've just rightly said. It's no longer the same. How are you, or what would you prescribe?
Yeah, so when it comes to execution, I mean, this is something we've done now. I mean, the research behind the work we're doing it's almost like 15 years old. There are easily 200,000 teams worldwide operating on the 4 disciplines process.
Right.
So we've learned 1 or 2 things about what it takes to take an idea from idea through teams, through execution, through market. And those principles have actually been codified in the 4 disciplines. At a 10,000 foot level, the first one is really around focus, right? It's a principle that is as real as gravity in the midst of everything else, right? So that's not something we invented. That's a principle that exists. So we've taken that. Second one is this idea of leverage, right? Not every activity has the same weight, that you know. What we've introduced now is the relationship between the things people do every day that are behavioral, and make sure that they predict the ability to achieve this thing that they say is important to them. That principle we call leverage, because if you have the right leverage points, then the goal will move, right? So first one, focus. Second one is leverage. Then thirdly is really the idea of scoreboarding, which most times people say, well, but we have KPIs, but KPIs are not enough, right? They're not enough. You can have and people are experts at KPIs. I had a session with one of the fast-moving consumer good companies, and they said, but we have a lot of KPIs, and we hear you talk a lot about this idea of focusing. So they took me to their war room. They had this large operations war room, and these guys were measuring everything. So I asked the question, I said, let's just pick one. Let's take your route to market, and let's say, of all the things on this board, right, which one will you say that if you didn't accomplish that, nothing else you accomplish on this board will matter, right? And it kind of paused and looked at me. And I think my sense is the pin dropped for him, right? So the third one is really this idea of engagement, that adults are more engaged when they know whether or not they are winning or losing. Now, we always say this principle exists for everybody else except Arsenal fans, but that's a joke. that's a joke. So, but the point is, engagement is powerful, right? We don't need to go to take our teams to Entebbe, for team build to get them engaged. We're saying adults are more likely to be engaged if they know clearly whether they are winning or losing, and what they do every day become better. We say, look, the first three disciplines, really think of it like a game, sets up the game. We know what you're focused on, we know the behaviors, and we know whether we're winning or losing. But whether your team is playing to win or playing not to lose, we say is dependent on what you do in the fourth discipline, which is really creating this cadence of accountability.
Right.
So 15 minutes where people come together to say, Tony, here's what you committed to do last week. Did you do them? If you did it, what was the results? And what commitments are you going to make this week, right? So we say the principle there is accountability. And really accountability is the individual decision that people make to rise above their individual circumstances to make great things happen.
Right.
Accountability is not excuses. Accountability is not an entire quarter of variance explanation. No, especially in periods of crisis and uncertainty, we need more accountability, not less. Okay.
Right.
So let me pause, Tony.
No, that's quite interesting, because you see, this now brings in the aspect of leadership, but also leadership which is pegged to the rest of the team, because again, the team, when you talk about accountability, the team has to be in line with that accountability, not just the leader.
That's right.
The team has to be.
And that's it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so how do you then have or create an effective leadership code as an entrepreneur, let's say, within your organization that has a flow or synchronized format with your other staff or employees?
Yeah, and what we know from our work, really, it begins with the leader, right? So we say the culture of any organization or team is really a reflection of the behavior of your senior leadership, right? Now, not everybody agrees to this, and that's okay, but that's what we now know. So when we talk about accountability, so take a very simple 15-minute meeting on accountability or on are we achieving or not achieving. In the process, we say, let the leaders go first, right? So let Tony, the leaders go first and say, look, last week, here's what I committed to do. And we're not talking of anything head chattering or sending somebody to the moon. We are saying, I committed last week to have a meeting with the head of finance, and we're going to come up with 2 ideas on our credit policy. Something simple. But the leader goes first. He or she models that behavior.
Right.
And I accomplished it. You see, there's that power in that. Now, contrast that with the leader who says, Tony, what did you say you would do last week? Right? You see, so one of the things we've seen from a leadership perspective is really modeling. Right. Second thing we also see is this idea that leaders keep the cadence consistent and strong. And what that means is every week we can't be too busy not to spend 15 minutes on the things that matter most to us. Right? Keep it strong. Let's use every opportunity to reinforce the behaviors that matter. Lisa Brassick's work in this area is quite compelling. So those be some of the things that leaders can do. And when leaders do that well, Tony, what we find is leaders begin to build a very high trust environment. Right? And remember, Tony, we say trust accelerates your ability to deliver your result. Trust is not just something soft. We say it, and trust is really where the confidence we have in the leader's integrity, right, and and their capability. So that's really what the leader is trying to do, Tony.
Right. That's quite interesting. You brought in the element of trust, and again, trust for businesses is not just within the leadership or the leader and his team, but also the customers. Because right now, many companies are going online. The issue of trust becomes very paramount because, again, many of these businesses were never doing this way.
Yes.
How do you work around a culture of trust now when it comes to, let's forget about the leader and the team, but the customers? How do you build that trust that comes from your customers, to be able to get onto or buy your product or procure your product?
Well, I think what we know in terms of if the question is really, how do we make sure we create this trust with our customers, particularly around digital channels? One of the things we know from some of the work we've seen around loyalty is really that when we are able to build this high loyalty with customers on some of the basic things, and by the way, there's an interesting research from the conference executive board on this.
Yeah.
So where they said your brand, your value to price ratio, your product features and benefits, and even your post-sales support, as important as these four things are, only account for 47% of why somebody will buy from you and remain loyal. Now think about that, right?
Yeah.
Your brand, your value to price ratio, right? Your features and benefits, and even your post-sales support, as important as those four things are, will only account for 47% of why people will buy and remain loyal. Right? Now, of course, what's the obvious question? What accounts for the 53%?
Yes.
And what we now know from CEB and from the Sales Research Council is that the experience you provide to people is more significant. In fact, companies are saying if the experience is so referenceable, they are willing to even pay for the experience even when they don't purchase.
Right.
See?
Right.
Now,
you know, Francis, let me just stop you there.
So
Francis,
think through this.
Francis,
Daniel, go ahead.
Francis, just before you continue, I just wanted, just before I forget about this, you know, Apple as a phone company, you know, one of its biggest selling points is the experience. And again, Steve Jobs was clear about that, you know. When people use an iPhone, you know, the experience should be worthwhile. And when you talked about experience, you know, coming into this equation as manning the 53%, it's quite amazing. Now I see a lot of sense in that. But please go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk about what all the great things Apple has done just from a design perspective. Yeah. But if you stay on the 53%, then we say, okay, what is this 53%? So it's the experience. It's the end-to-end experience. People talk about customer touch points. Those things are great. Now, there's something we also now know, which is quite interesting.
Yes.
That not all experiences or not every touch point in the experience is important. We now know that people commit to memory. Listen to the research from Daniel Cunningham, that people commit to memory those aspects of the experience, right, they are making a choice about. So, for example, the one he gave was, you listen to a concert play, right? Somebody's listened to 20 minutes of great music.
Yes.
Now, guess what this person commits to memory? It is the scratching sound. It is the last thing that they remember. You see? So think of the implications when you are designing, what we call, when you are doing service design. Think of the great implication for that. So to come back to your original question, therefore, I think they thought we need to design experiences that are human-centered, that are referenceable. If you ask people, they said the number one rule in customer service is, quote, you must make it easy for me to do business with you. Now just think about that. Right? Think about the simplicity of that. And also, Tony, think about it. Loyalty, when you have loyal customers, it's not a nice to have, right? It's not I give you dinner, you give me Christmas hampers. No, it's not. I don't come to you because I don't have Christmas hampers. Yeah. When we make loyal customers, they do four things for us, right? They give us feedback, right? How likely are you to refer, right? That's important. They recommend for, then over time, the average transactability goes up.
We're having a very interesting conversation with Francis here, talking about the disciplines for successful SMEs. And so many things have come out from this segment. You know, loyalty, trust, the idea that leadership is very essential in, you know, how you also run your teams. I mean, all of these things are kind of key and very, very particular to many SMEs that have been struggling in these past few months. If you want to stay relevant, if you want to really know what's going on, I think this is the conversation that is worthwhile. So we'll be right back after the break and delve into more with Francis. All right, welcome back to the SME Connect. We're having a frank discussion with my very interesting friend, Francis Egbuson. Francis Egbuson is a leadership coach, a man who understands how to manage people. He's a guy who has done so much in his realm when it comes to enterprise development for small businesses and supporting mainly the leadership, but also the teams within the businesses on how to perform better and create more value for the company. So Francis, before we begin with other questions that have actually come in, let us first go back to value, the issue of value. As a business, as an enterprise, when do you know or how do you know you're creating value, or you're just wasting time and just, going through a phase?
Well, there's a very simple way. I had the privilege of hanging out with Bill Oled, the guy who did discipline entrepreneurship, and it was quite interesting. He said, look, the single most important, condition for any business, small businesses, innovation-driven enterprises, is really a customer who is paying, a paying customer. They say until you have that, you don't have a business.
Right.
So customers pay for value.
So let me get this right, Francis. If I have a business plan which speaks to, okay, I'm just going to show visibility for 1 year, and while, that year I'm showing who I am, and probably in year 3 is when I'll start making money, you are showing pretty much no value, right?
Well, once again, the market will tell you, because if you look at the conditions, right? So I didn't quite get a full narrative, but the idea is whatever it is I am bringing to market, right? Either SME or IDE, somebody is paying, and it's quite simple the way we look at it. Can you show me, Tony, the first person who will pay for that? Can you show me the next 3? Can the next 3 refer the next 10? And can I get the next 50 in what we call a beachhead market, right? A market, I believe, will understand the value I'm bringing and the gaps I'm trying to close. And it doesn't matter whether you are in fish farming, Matatu, or you are writing an app. If you cannot get this process, you don't have a business.
Right.
So when we say value is really determined by the person, who is paying. That's why some people will fly economy class to Dubai, others will pay business. Value, we say, is in the eyes of the beholder. Right. So my advice and I'm not in the advisory business most of the time, but we always say when we do coaching, we always ask entrepreneurs, who's going to pay for this? Oh, it's a great idea. Well, I know it is, but who's going to pay for it?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to the idea of who are you solutioning for? What problem are you trying to solve? Because if you're solving no problem, there's no one you're solutioning for, then you're pretty much just doing it for yourself. So you are not making sense. It has no value.
Look, I told a true story. I worked for Picture Vision, right? In my early years, I worked for a company called Picture Vision. Picture Vision was purchased by Eastman Kodak for almost $46 million in the first .com wave, right? And then we thought we had a business model that said, look, we will store your digital images for life for free. Now, please don't laugh, right? Don't laugh. Because it didn't take long, right? It didn't take long to figure out that free is not a sustainable enterprise. It's not a sustainable model, right? We had to figure out a way that people pay. So things like fulfillment, right? So I store your image, but you want to put the image on a t-shirt. You want to put it on a car. What else do you want to do with that image? So that's really just a simple example of saying, the value, somebody's paying for value. And another question, Tony, which you have not asked is also, is the value you are creating also worth your while? That's another important thing. Right? Yeah, that's another, because you may create value, 50 customers. Well, we want to suggest that you are so much more than 50 customers. So how do we scale, right? How do we solve the big problems of our time, right? And I think that's really what we want our businesses to really do from a legacy and from a contribution perspective.
Wow, that's quite interesting. Thanks for that. Now, let me move you away from value and business now to back to management. Because you see, right now, one of the biggest challenges is managing people. And again, it's also interesting to understand that, but also interesting to note rather, that you're also managing people remotely because some people are working from their homes, okay?
Yes.
So how does it happen in terms of management? Does it have, or decision making, or building a consensus around decisions? Does it have to be top down? or up-down? You know, how does it happen, or what would you advise for businesses that are out there trying to think of the best way to manage this management issue and decision-making within their enterprises?
Yeah, so if we draw from what we've seen in the work we've done with execution, I think, and I think you've also experienced some of that, Tony, it's both ways. You see, we say the principle here is really no involvement, no commitment, right? No involvement, no commitment.
So sense of ownership.
So unless people are in...
the sense of ownership.
In terms of the decision you're trying to make.
Yeah.
Right? This idea of involvement commitment. So how do we go about achieving that? Right? So if you look at the work we did, so there was a space where we said, guys, let's get all the best thinking, particularly for things that have to do with frontline engagement. You can't sit on the 14th floor and legislate and prescribe frontline behavior. It just doesn't work. You can try it, but it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we say bottom up means frontline. I see you're laughing.
No, I was just imagining the scenario in my head, you know, 14th floor, and you're planning for the guys at the basement floor. No, but you can go on, carry on.
Exactly. Exactly. So we need to get the best thinking on the front line, right? Now we also need to ensure, particularly when we get to the point where we say, okay, this is what the team has come up with. How close is this to where we're trying to go, particularly where higher order objectives are concerned, meaning we're trying to make sure we create alignment. So there's a role for the leader in providing the direction, the alignment, and the commitment needed to make sure we drive this. So I don't think it's a straightforward, oh, I'm a top-down leader, oh, I'm a bottom-up leader. We need both ways, because the principle is we want to get people involved. People are more likely to be committed to an idea if they've participated in its creation.
Yeah, yeah. And again, now, this actually now brings me to something quite interesting, because you see, in any organization, any business, any SME, you have the challenge of some of the people who feel they are not worthwhile to the vision of the business, which again, I think personally, sometimes when the leadership fails to articulate the vision and the mission of the business, there's a really a diversion diversion in the sense of thinking with the other team players, especially the guys at the bottom. But how does one, or how does any individual within the team come about and in an intellectual or an amazing way create value in terms of their ideas for the team without feeling, this thing is too high up there that I cannot? How do you involve the whole team in that ownership that you've just mentioned, that sense of ownership? Because again, like you've said, if they're not part of the process, then it's pretty much a futile intervention. So how do you get them to come in?
So we've seen this in the work we've done. We can also draw from the work of Edmondson, right? The lady who did this issue of psychological safety. In a research, they co-partnered with Google on this. So what we know is people are more likely, right, to give more, contribute more, innovate more, if they work in an environment where they feel safe, right? This idea of psychological safety, that my ideas will not be subject to ridicule, that there's an opportunity for me to contribute and I feel safe about it. So one is psychological safety, right? So what are we doing on a daily basis to make sure people feel safe to bring their whole person, body, mind, spirit, and heart to work, right? Not just my head, right? My whole person. Secondly is, do I belong? Is working for Tony in this team the place where I want to make my contribution? And leaders also send what Dan Coyle calls signals. You send signals to me to say, Francis belongs or he doesn't belong, right? Then thirdly, this idea of self-esteem, very important, right? Is this a place where my best work can come out? How am I treated, right? And how am I viewed, right, by the team? Now, that is not to say that the individual doesn't have responsibility. The individual does. And that's why you'll find that if you look at the engagement studies, I think and these studies have been going on for about 30 years. The numbers have not moved significantly, right? 20 or more % of the people, about 22, 23, are fully engaged. you have about 60% in the middle not engaged. Then you have the other 22% of people who are working against you, but they're on your payroll, right? And when we ask them, and when you ask them, what is the difference in where people choose to belong, Tony? It's quite interesting.
Right.
They say it is largely due to how they are led.
Okay. So leadership comes back again into this whole equation.
You see what's happening here?
Yeah.
Now, when we talk about that, people say, well, that's so much to expect of a leader. Yes, we know that. But that's why we also say people should not be in a hurry to want to lead anybody. First, start by leading yourself. Start by leading yourself.
True. Now, let me get back to this whole thing now, back to teams, because I like what you mentioned before. You know, you just mentioned that 19% are totally disengaged. They're just freeloaders on your payroll. I think what we've just been through, you know, this whole lockdown, this COVID situation, has also kind of highlighted those freeloaders, because for many organizations, many of these people have pretty much been in the background and are still in the background. But how do you then work around this whole idea of the definition of a team? Because you see, someone will ask whether it's a team or it's just people who are just employees. I mean, what would be a team, or what is a definition of a team in a working environment?
So I didn't get the last part, but if the idea is how do we get members of a team
the second question,
working towards a common objective or a common goal, if that's what we're trying to point to. So remember, even if you used the Tuckerman's model, right, on forming, storming, numbing, and performing and adjoining, we know that there are stages that a team will go through, right, to get them from a collection of individuals to really working in great synergy.
Okay.
We know there are a number of things necessary for synergistic relationships to exist in teams, right? One, which we do in our work on the 7 habits, is really around valuing differences, right? I've visited offices where people high-five one another and it's, oh yeah, Tony and I are from the same college. Half of the people here, we all are from the same secondary school. There is nothing to high-five about. If you have an environment where everybody's from the same school, same part of the country, what you do is you reproduce your weaknesses, right? And there's no opportunity for difference and creativity and innovation. So first one is value differences. Leaders should intentionally hire people who are unlike them, right? So that's the first one, value differences. Second one is willingness, right? That the team have willingly come together to try and solve a specific problem. De Hoek talks about it, right? That a leader, the relationship between leader and led is not that of a bystander, right? And how do we do that? We ensure that people feel like this, once again, going back to this issue of belonging.
Yes.
This is a place I want to give my best work. Thirdly, is the ability to have clarity on where we are going, right? We can't just assume that people know. When we did the research with Harris Poll, what we found was only 15% of people, and that was after we adjusted for anybody who just said anything marginally close to the goal of the organization, we added it. Most people say, we don't know where we are going. Either the directions change all the time, either the goals are too many or they're vastly under-communicated. And people also say, even when we know where we're going, I don't know what I have to do on a daily basis that I can influence to help us get there.
Right.
You see what's happening? We call those the 4 breakdowns of execution. So I think those are some of the things. Now, once again, I don't want to make this prescriptive because some of the things we've seen, Tony, even from the incubator, are hardworking men and women who are doing everything on a daily basis to try and build their teams. And I will just suggest, let's just ensure that we have a set of principles to work against, right? Don't just try and do it because it has always worked. Subject it to a set of principles. Focus is one. Difference is another one. Another one which we don't talk about, Tony, is listening. That's another one, right?
Oh yeah, very, very important. In fact, listening is the most crucial part of leadership.
Yes, right? So we know that you can listen people to their greatness, right? That we will listen. Another one is curiosity. Are leaders curious, or we all pretend like we know it all? No. Are we curious? Less judgmental. Do we rely on the power of the quality of our questions to bring out the best in people? Are we compassionate? We understand the periods, the time we are in. Compassion does not mean you don't hold people accountable, right? Then do we have the courage to have the tough conversations? You know, Tony, you've worked with us now 4 weeks, right? Here are my observations in the last 4 weeks. And here are the 1 or 2 things I think needs to be done for us to make progress. Yeah. I don't wait 6 months or 3 months and come and tell Tony, oh, you know, Tony, you are not performing, we're going to put you on PIP. I mean, what is that? Will you do that if that was your own business? You see? So those are some of the things we need to have in our culture to be able to build a level of high accountability in small businesses, in innovation-driven businesses, and in large enterprises.
Right, right. Francis, you know, you've just talked about compassion, and I guess one thing that has become very synonymous with a lot of conversations on organization culture, business strategies, and all of that is the issue of empathy. And I haven't had you speak about it, but I think empathy has become very key in how teams relate with one another, leadership relates with the teams. I mean, can you speak more about empathy from your angle in terms of the business world?
Well, I think empathy or compassion, I think the idea is people will continue to ask a certain number of questions, right? Especially what we have seen, especially in periods like this. They look at their leader and say, you know, remember the first thing they ask, even if you just use the Gallup pyramid. At the beginning, people say, okay, what am I getting from Tony or the incubator? What am I giving? Okay. Do I belong here? Does Tony care about my welfare? Now, in periods like COVID, they also add, how about, am I safe? Do you care for my own safety?
Yes.
And will I have a job at the end of this period of uncertainty? Right?
Yeah.
And what we're finding is leaders, there's a lot of difficulty in having this type of courageous conversations.
Yeah, true.
Tony, here's what I know about the situation. Here's what I know. Here's what I'm going to do to get more information. Here are the commitments I can make, right? So one of the companies we work with, I mean, the MD said, look, part of care that they showed was they had a 24-hour medical service that was readily available and that the staff had access to that. And that's one of your, I think your former employers, Tony, you know, so they demonstrate that. Now, so things like compassion, things like empathy are behavioral, right? People want to know, do you care? Can I trust you? See?
True,
and
true,
those ways of leading are more now in periods of uncertainty than when periods are not certain. Now, let me also add, empathy or compassion or ability to see from my own point of view does not mean that we don't hold people accountable. Does not mean that we don't deliver results. Let's be clear. Let's be very clear on this. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. It just means we're going to do it in a way that attends to the whole person. Body, mind, spirit, and heart. Not just the hands. Right? Somebody says, you can pay me for my hands and feet, but my heart is volunteer only.
Very, very, very true. Francis, oh man, that has been a great conversation that we've had. You've really, personally also at a level made me think. I think you noticed that at some point I was drifting off because I was also in my own world. But I mean, this has been quite interesting. Your conversation and your experience in this whole idea, organization culture, leadership, enterprise development, SMEs. Wow. I must say thank you so much for giving me your time to join us on this SME Connect. Thank you so much for being a valuable resource when it comes to how businesses relate, not just within themselves, but without or within their surroundings. And again, we look forward to hosting you very soon on the SME Connect. But just, Francis, as a way of your parting shot, tell me what you would consider as your most important disciplines when it comes to SMEs, and we'll end it there.
I think
I always want more. I'm sorry, but I always want more.
And I was actually thinking about it when we're coming to say, what would be the most important discipline? I think the most important discipline, really, Tony, is their capacity to look in the mirror. To look in the mirror. Because once again, we know, I said the success of any intervention really is based on the inner condition of the intervener.
Right.
The founder, the entrepreneur, the leader must look in the mirror. Unless we can solve the issues internally in terms of the choices we make, our sense of the kind of contribution we're trying to make, our ability to put our priorities right? It talks about this the idea that things which matter the most must never be at the mercy of things which matter the least. Unless we can really, essentially, Tony, what we are saying is unless we can build a foundation based on character and integrity, we don't stand a chance.
Sure.
So I don't want to call it a parting shot, it's a continuing shot. The life's work on our integrity and our character. That, Tony, in my view and experience, and that's the journey I'm also on for myself, are really the things we now know will make the difference. And by the way, if you want to pick it up, it's actually titled The Return on Character. The Return on Character is a great research.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much, Francis. You've been quite amazing. Thank you so much for that. I would like to thank our partners, CloudCore, for coming on board and helping us, bring this out to you. This show can be found on our social media platforms. That is SME Connect on YouTube and SME Connect on Facebook. And of course, this is also on Comrade Otoa and on TV right now, which is Urban TV. We thank you so much for joining us and see you next week.